Committee of the Whole meeting to order for November the 4th, 2019. And Council Chambers, approval of the agenda, please. That the November 4th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Moved. Second. All those in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes, that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held September the 9th be adopted as presented. Moved and second. All those in favor? Any errors or omissions? Carried. Next piece of business, report coming from our Director of Community Development, the retail sale of cannabis. I'll turn it over to Mr. Fortolotsky first. Any opening remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an important step to achieve your goal of, I guess, getting retail cannabis sale into the community, as you've indicated earlier. Mr. Gill will present a lot of information tonight, and hopefully you've had a bit of time to look at it, because we'll need some focused direction to affect change and amendment to certain things like bylaws and policies. And in particular, the zoning bylaw will be impacted seriously, or importantly, also the business licensing bylaw, the procedure bylaw as well, and we may well have to develop new policies as a result of this initiative. But that will all follow on after you give us direction and you, as a council, decide on the changes required, specifically, again, to zoning and business licensing. And tonight, it's zoning that we're talking about. So I'd like to pass on the floor here to my colleague, Jazz Gill, to assist the mayor, I guess, in the discussion.
Your worship, through you, in accordance with the report, just sort of consolidated remarks, we re-established sort of the community survey that went out to the community, just to reintroduce to some of the new members of council, so they understood where all this was coming from. It was the last administration's sort of efforts to look at existing cannabis retail regulations within, let's say, the member municipalities. Staff went out and looked at those municipalities, and our research compilation here is based on an August 2019 sort of research timeline. I think within now, from then to now, I think it's probably changed somewhat, the sample. However, looking at the other member municipalities at that point in time, we only knew that they were all sort of in the drafting stages as well. They're in a similar situation as us. So we started looking at the liquor and cannabis regulation branches list of licensed sort of retail centers. And we wanted to use a sample that was more representative of us, both from an enforcement side of things, and then also from a size and, let's say, a policing stance. And in some situations, we also looked at the fact if they had, let's say, an outlying highway nearby, or if a highway crossed through the municipality, and just to see how they were formulating their regulations. Staff found that with the general pattern when it comes to the cannabis regulations from the municipality reviewed for this research, that all municipalities amended their zoning bylaw to make way for this retail sale. They also put in stipulations or conditions as to how and where that use can exist. The number one thing that we noticed was that there was protection to protect minors from the influences and potential effects from this use. So they were using spatial separations to distance themselves from activities that were more child-oriented or that could exist on a certain parcel, be it playgrounds, daycare facilities, and schools. We looked at the business license fee side of things as well. We noted that based on the sort of assessment of those communities, there's certain exceptions to one municipality, Chilliwack, I'll say. But other than that, we noticed that municipalities were fairly reasonable in their pricing and their basing that on the administration and the enforcement side of things when it came down to sort of the licensing efforts. Furthermore, we then also looked at the liquor cannabis regulations. We highlighted for council what that license looks like, what that license is for. It's not for the component of, let's say, retail sale, it's for the full spectrum, is how they issue the licenses. So that means it's not limited to dried cannabis, edible seeds, oils, and topical creams. It means everything. So if you're looking to be a retailer and you're saying, well, I'm gonna only sell CBD oils, this license will also cover off, let's say, any sort of future addendums, be it cannabis as well, like dry cannabis. The hours of operation is represented by the LCRB, is not before 9 or after 11 p.m. Municipalities do have the ability to create more regulations, more conditions on top of that. With it, it also means that we would take more responsibility on administratively. With that, it's a general higher cost, let's say, on that administration aspect. Then furthermore, we looked at the district's approach as a workshop. The latter part is for this committee of a whole and to have a discussion. So we took components of what municipalities were doing. We introduced it. If this is the way that council would like to channelize or give us direction moving forward to sort of set up a regulatory system around retail sale of cannabis.
Okay. Very extensive report. I'm glad you capsulized everything again that was on the survey. There's a question for Mr. Gill to start us off here.
Very much older.
Councilman Midland.
Thank you, through you. Can't get into my computer, I had all sorts of great notes in there, but anyway, one of the questions I had was about the regulation where it must be like a separate entrance and whatnot, so does that mean that that is the only product that that location can sell, or that can they sell other products as well, linked or not linked?
Your worship, through you, it basically means the sole aspect of that store is going to be for cannabis and nothing else. Yes, there are sort of relevant items that you can sell off that should be related to it. And that's what they're saying, is that it shouldn't be linked to another business. It needs to be its sole item. And the separate entrance, no common entrance is required. That's the licensing branch. That's not something that we're stipulating. Anybody that applies for a license would be made aware of that.
I guess one of my questions around that is, like, can government liquor stores sell cannabis? Like, can the current government liquor store here offer cannabis for sale in the same facility that they're offering liquor sales?
From my understanding, no.
Okay. Yeah.
And only in special circumstances, for example, if you're remote.
Councilor Erickson.
So when I was reading through that, too, I was thinking if the building is a strata building, and you have one entrance and off to the side, you have another door, so there could be a business straight in, and then off to the side you have another door with that cannabis, that wouldn't work.
From that example, it seems like it's a common entrance that sort of allows you to get into that cannabis side of things. In accordance with the regulations, I don't believe that's permitted. From the
So
provincial
there's that
side.
one common entrance on the outside, you can't have a common entrance in the building, and then have other stores in that with one door only going into that cannabis.
From my conversation, so you wouldn't find this facility in a mall.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, Paul.
Yes,
Yeah.
but in a strip mall format, it may be facilitated because it's, there's an external factor to it. I think it's also to do with the security requirements that's required for the license.
Yeah, see, let's just take, like, for example, let's just take a store in town like the Bank of Commerce. It's a main entrance, and off to the side, they could have a whole nother business on that side, but since it's a main entrance store, they could have 2 or 3 different other entrances off there for different businesses. That wouldn't work
You would have to isolate the one entrance for the cannabis retailer.
to the outside.
Yes.
you could cut the bank in half, if you will, put a new door on the side and be total separate.
It has to be total. They can't have, yeah.
Understand.
When I read through that, I was just trying to figure how that would work.
Councillor Smith.
Mr. Gill. Also, I believe the structure of the building would be important too. Like when you're dividing it, you wouldn't be able to have like 2x4 kind of structure between it. I'm sure it would have to be certain specifications for security reasons and that. Would it not?
It would, you would also have, I guess the building or not building bylaw, the BC building code would complement that as well. If you're creating a separate tenant within a structure, or let's say you're splitting down a building just to have its own separate entrance and its own store area, you would have to have a fire separation in between.
Yeah. And I understand that there's quite a bit of training for this too, you know, to go into this business.
It's a requirement of the licensing, the LCDR, that you're required to have responsible training for each staff member. There's the differences between what certain cannabis products do, topical creams versus CBD oils versus dried cannabis, or even edibles.
So the more they add on, the more training is going to be needed, required to have that employee up to speed.
That is correct, yes.
Councillor.
Yeah, so are these regulations BC regulations, or a combination of federal regulations and BC regulations?
Through your worship, so the federal government is basically issuing licenses for the production. They also look at it's on the first page, I believe. I did do a little bit of a breakdown of what the federal government looks at. Their framework is similar to the regulatory regime where Health Canada will be required for the production, manufacturing, and or sale of these products. The edible extracts will be limited to, so they do the quality control aspect of, and the dosage amounts of 10 milligrams for, let's say, THC. Topical products limited to 10,000 milligrams of THC. Packaging of products must be plain with necessary warning and information in an attempt to make it less appealing to minors.
But this doesn't set up the guidelines for the actual physical structure.
No, and so
It's just guidelines.
that is correct. So Health Canada, if you're producing and basically making or growing marijuana or cannabis, they have requirements for that, for the structures. They have security requirements for that. However, in this case, it's provincial legislation dictating what the structure needs to be, what it needs to look like. Where you can't have, let's say for an example, floor to ceiling a transparent wall. They don't want cannabis products to be visible from, let's say, a street. There are some municipalities that sort of talk about in their regulations that they don't want to see it in a modular structure, that it needs to be on a permanent foundation. And I think they outlined it because, quite frankly speaking, you could put a modular structure on a permanent foundation and just anchor it. However, some could still rip it apart.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, if I can, we've highlighted several questions and talking points in bold, and it would be very helpful, I think, in the conversation if you could go through and make sure that we cover those. And it would assist, I think, in focusing some of the conversation as well and questions. Because some of the topics we cover, like federal and provincial legislation and regulation, we have no effect over anywhere. So it's not a decision that you could take to modify.
We have to abide by the provincial regulation.
And absolutely,
Councillor Stewart, do you have a question? Oh, sorry, Councillor Crowe.
I was mostly just, what drew my eye was the kind of the business license aspect. And I noticed it really ranges from about $1,500 down to $500 to sometimes even lower in some towns. But I was wondering if you could kind of maybe just put some light on the fact of why is Chilliwack's, like I think $1,000 is a little low, but why would Chilliwack be that much more higher? Do you have any idea why?
And we were trying to figure that out.
To weed out, like just make serious inquiries, or what is that?
Some municipalities took a firm stance, and they also looked at it from their fee end of things. It's, like I said, it's about the enforcement and how much you want to enforce. And it could be the fact that their regulatory regime set up for their selling of cannabis, their framework, is probably requiring more than one inspection over, let's say, a quarterly period. And so that's how they're sort of setting it up. They're taking on more of an administrative burden. For the lesser municipalities, and everybody's got to understand that the provincial government also has an enforcement section as well that would review or deal with complaints against, let's say, a retailer. And it's always backed up by the RCMP as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No different than the liquor.
No, of course, yeah.
Councilor Medlock.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if you wanna, how you wanna deal with it, but like looking at the survey questions, I'd say for myself, I tend to agree with, and the people that I've talked to, sort of speak to the majority of how these questions have been answered. So what I was hoping we could get done today is sort of figure out some, like, how many, how far apart distances from things like that, so.
Yes.
Yeah, so I could just tell you how I feel about those things if you wanna start there, or do you wanna kind of work through it?
Well, I don't mind jumping around. If you've got your thoughts together now, I want to go ahead.
I definitely don't.
I will follow you.
But, I mean, so, should both allow, I think, yes, absolutely should allow it. So, it was one of the topic of conversation I had with a lot of counselors and whatnot, and CAOs and some other people that I ran into at UBCM, just asking, you know, have you already got retail sale of cannabis, and then how are you handling that? And I got some good feedback. I know we've had, the report says something like over 30 inquiries from people that are interested, so the idea of a lottery came up. I don't know if I like that idea. I think it should be sort of a first come, first served type situation. There was one community, I wish I could remember specifically which one, it might even be Cannabis, where they didn't even start their process at the municipality level until after the province had given the okay, and then it went down. And I think that would be a good way to reduce some administrative burden on our part, instead of having them come to us and then go on to the province. I think that's a better way to go, so that you don't have to deal with 30 people and find out that they don't even make it past the provincial level, right?
If I may add to that.
Sure.
So that's how it's set up. It's basically you got to initiate your application with the province.
Oh, it starts there, it
Yeah.
has to, okay.
And the question is asked, is this municipality allowing or permitting retail sale of cannabis?
Okay,
The answer is no, then that,
it stops it.
it stops
Okay.
right there, full stop.
They were the only one in the report that I could see that actually had that as a note that they were the second contact. So if that's the way it is, that's great. So as far as limiting number of locations,
Why don't you stop there?
We'll stop there.
Because we should talk as a group, I think, about how the application process, how the applicant should be selected. And then move on to the next thing. Let's try and stay on track if we can. And that's what you brought up first.
Yeah, a lot of things come into play as to how they're selected, so, you know, like the location that they select, I think has to be a part of that provincial application first on. So I think we should determine sort of, say, a distance from parks, schools, if churches come into play, and then between each other, if we're gonna have a distance between
You
them.
can go that way if you want.
Yeah.
It's just, the applicant is gonna be aware of all that when they put their application in.
Right. So for them to even think about applying here, they're gonna have to know if they can fit into a space that they're looking at, right?
Okay, then let's jump the other way and go into the zoning for the areas.
Okay, so on zoning,
There you go.
my thoughts are, the only one that was sort of contentious in your report, I think, was C5, the transition, commercial transitional, because it borders into some residential areas. There's not a lot of properties that are in that zoning that I think would be well suited, in my mind. So I don't have a problem with allowing it really in any of the commercial zones. I think one of the other factors that may determine where it ends up is perhaps the distance apart from each other, because that could come into play. And I think that those will be some limiting factors overall in the big picture. If we say no fixed number of them, but they must be certain distances apart from each other, that will eliminate a lot of businesses as you go along down the line. It'll sort of set out how many can be in a certain, well, within the district boundaries within this commercial zoning. So my opinion on the zoning part of it would be that it would be allowed in any of the commercial zones, including downtown C1, C5, C3. I'll stop there for a bit.
Take a breath. Welcome.
Thank you, sorry for being late.
Councilor Smith.
Yeah, I would like to see it along the whole Princeton Highway, the old whole Princeton Way, not downtown, near our parks, near our schools, rec center, anything else, and I think that would be a better location. It's just my opinion, but and for now, to have one private one business in that area picked out, so.
That was a recommendation by some of the other communities that near or on highways.
Yeah.
Highway access. So that would be one to consider.
I'll give my 2 cents on this, I guess. My only personal opinion is I don't think it should be near the school part of it. After that, I don't think the parks and stuff like that, I don't know if it's no different than having a liquor store beside a park. Doesn't mean that they're just gonna go buy the product and smoke it in the park or contain it in parks. I don't have a problem with it being in the downtown part of it either. I went on the summer, for people I went with, we went on a tour down to the Oregon coast and visited some cannabis retail stores, and that's the first time I've ever stepped in any of them. All of them very well done. And every time we went in there, every single one that went to, the person asked where you're from. And so I asked back, well, why are you asking that? Well, we're always curious to see if we have people that are local or not coming in here. 90% of our customers are based out of town, driving through town. So I think as a tourism town that we're committing, I think it is gonna be an economical benefit for town, and no matter what, I think it's gonna be that way. So to promote people just coming through our town, we have a group right now that's pushing to bring people into town, and we want to promote our downtown core. To say that we shouldn't have business downtown, I don't think is the right way to do it, and only section one corridor that's designed for them. I don't think it's the right way to do it, because we're pushing to have people come into our downtown core, see where we live, see what we're doing. So just because they want to decide that they're connoisseur in this, having some cannabis, and I think that we're gonna get that. People are driving through, you know what, let's grab, or we're in town for the day, let's go grab some cannabis from somewhere, right? Like, that's gonna happen. We're going out to the Othello Tacos, grab some and go smoke a joint. That's gonna happen. Like, this is a discussion we need to talk about it. It always seems like this unruly thing, we shouldn't talk about smoking weed. Well, people are gonna do it, and I don't think we should limit it to where we have it in our town on that point of schools. Yes, I agree with that. But I think if we're limiting it to not having our downtown core, and we're trying to promote our downtown core, if it's done properly, I think it could be a success for our town too. So that's my personal opinion on it. I don't think we should limit it to just on a highway sector, on or off the highway, grab it, on the highway, leave. Because we want to promote our town. I don't think we should limit it to that part of it. That's just my personal opinion. I'm one of 7, so it opens up the discussion a little bit more.
Pretty quiet group on cannabis, it surprises me.
I agree with what Victor's saying, but in the same sense, and what Dusty said makes sense too, but it's not gonna, with that being said, they're not gonna buy on the whole Princeton, and if they're gonna come to town, they're gonna come to town. They're not just in town if they're gonna buy cannabis to come check out shops and smoke a joint. I mean, that's in my mind, I don't think that's the case. But, yeah, I do understand what Victor's saying. I was kind of leaning towards that same side too when I was reading through the surveys myself anyway.
Also for policing and that too, you know, it's closer to the police station stuff too, which was quite some of the concern in quite a few other towns. This was pointed out by the report.
Erickson.
So, we don't want it near the parks, and we can't basically have it downtown, because there's kind of a park right across the street from downtown.
Last one I'm looking at, is there,
So, but if you wanted to Hope Princeton, tell me a spot on Hope Princeton that's available for retail, single entrance on the Hope Princeton Highway. I don't know of any. I don't think the motel room would be satisfactory. That's the opens there. I don't know of any commercial building on Hope Princeton that would be amenable to what we're talking about.
well, there is, a couple applicants have asked, and we're talking next door to the restaurant on the Save-On site there, that flat piece of property there.
Well, they'd have to build something.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I'm just talking about
It's not existing retail.
yeah.
Mr. Good, before I take the next one, we talking 100 meters, 200 meters? I
So
forget.
we just give, as an example, this is just what a 100-meter buffer looks like from Memorial Park.
Okay.
So I think it's.
So it doesn't limit Main Street, like Wallace Street or anything like that, it limits that basically one block square around.
That's correct.
Okay. That gives me a little bit better visual than I was gonna comment on, because I was gonna say, was brought up about policing, is, are we being policed on the drinking in the park too? I think people smoking weed are a lot more pleasant than people that are drinking out of paper bags in the park that we're dealing with currently. So are we, well, when they're coming down for the drinking in the park, well, they might as well deal with smokers in the park too, I don't know. It's a tough one, right? Like, how do you discriminate it on that part of it? That's my opinion on it, I guess, but, yeah.
Councilor Miller.
So my question on, is that's 100 meters you're showing there, you say?
Mhm.
Yeah, like looking through the other communities, there's all sorts of varying differences, but it really may work for them because of how their communities laid out. Again, UBCM, I was talking to a staff person from Preston, and they have a very similar situation where their downtown core is kind of like ours. They don't have a park in the middle of it, but up to one end they have a school. So I think they use 150 meters, it's in here somewhere, but they felt like that was a fair enough distance away from their, 150 meters from public schools and places. They didn't have a concern with the park as far as where their downtown core went. So I was thinking 100, 150 meters, but I was trying to figure out what that actually looked like, so I think you appreciate that. So my question then is, if somebody is within that 100-meter buffer area, could they still apply for a variance, or is there always that option to somebody?
Yes, there would be the allowance of a variance permit.
Okay.
So, and at that point, council then would have to look at how that impacts it. There would still be a notification.
Right.
So we gotta keep in mind, when an application is received, it's always gonna be a public process attached to it. The regulations basically want us to gather the views of the public. And then council ultimately can say, no, we don't want to go through this exercise, and that application dies there. It's not like the liquor.
Yeah.
Liquor's a little bit different. Liquor basically, if we say no, we're not going to provide comment, they will continue the process through their own avenues. In this case with cannabis, it's the fact that if the municipality doesn't agree, so sad, and that application ends there.
So to Councilor Smith's point about, his feeling was he didn't want to see anything down the corridor of 6th Avenue and whatnot, I think almost all of 6th Avenue where there is potential to have a business would be within 100 meters of a park, with the pool, the arena, and the ballpark, so that 100-meter radius would eliminate that from the discussion, which I think is good. And I'm okay with the 100-meter radius. I'm glad that there still is an option for variances and that would be looked at as an individual basis. So, that's where I'd like to see it go, is 100-meter distance from parks. In your report, you talked about churches and facilities like that too, but most other people haven't even brought that into the fold, so I don't think we should go there either.
Okay.
That's my own personal opinion again. I think just from parks and schools, 100-meter radius.
Quick question on this. So the 100-meter radius would be for the sale of retail of cannabis. Already in the park, we already have a bylaw stating no smoking in the park as well too, right? Just to comment on that, okay.
And provincial legislation also dictates where you can smoke cannabis and how much one person can have on themselves.
Yeah.
So it's very similar to cigarette smoking, 6 meters away from any building, windows or ear ducts.
Seeing the visual like this, honestly makes me, like I said, Councilor Smith had mentioned on it too, downtown core, we're just considering that block, the downtown core, to not limited from anything from Wallace Street. I think this puts a little bit better perspective on it too. This might not be in the park, but could be within a boundary as well, it's still on Wallace Street. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councilor Stewart.
So I'm just curious then, so then what Councilor Medlock was saying is that all commercial zones would then be amended to include the retail sale of cannabis. But that doesn't mean that it will happen in every location. They would still come to us and ask for permission. So is that the easiest route then, is to go through a text amendment to just do all commercial zones?
In some scenarios, you'll probably find that it's a little bit easier, let's say as you move away from the downtown core, and as Councillor Smith had brought up, along the Old Home Preston Way, you're pretty much away from all the playgrounds, any sort of child associated activities. So the likelihood is that they would need it more so than anything, if we went down that route. And my question to council is it, are we keeping it to the old town of Hope proper, or did you guys want to expand it out towards, let's say Silver Creek?
I'm okay with anywhere as long as it's commercially zoned. It's a business just like any other. I don't think we need to limit it.
Because our Silver Creek area, the sort of little commercial we have, there's a school across the way.
Yes, if it's within 100 meters, that would eliminate that property.
Yes.
Is how I look at it.
What about Cockle Lake? There's some commercial up there.
There's the fast track gas station that's out there. I think that's the only commercial that we have left.
And you're in heavy residential too.
That's right.
And we have, more development going on right now too, so.
So we don't have a consensus on that just yet. Where do you wanna go from here? What topic do you wanna move and come back?
I think, yeah, just comment, I think you have a consensus on the 100-meter radius.
No, I said we didn't have a consensus.
I think you,
You do have.
I think 100-meter, it's consensus from the, around the park.
After I see the image on the screen, I can get behind that.
Yeah,
I mean,
me
if
as
that's,
well.
because I don't, like you said, you can't limit them to, if that's the buffer,
Same for
I don't agree with that.
I think it's consensus. I personally just,
I feel that probably we should establish which zones should have this new use added as a text amendment.
Okay.
on the bylaw part of it.
So basically,
For the zoning.
the zoning wise, and then the framework would work as use regulations, no different than how we do it with, let's say, secondary dwellings, or it's a separate section within the bylaw, section 8, and then we can now outline sort of, let's say, spatial separations, buffer zones from certain uses.
Yeah, so again, I mean, we have a zone called CBD. Come on, right? Yeah. But CBD, C3, C5, so looking at the map in our insert here, it's different than that one. CBD incorporates pretty much all of Wallace Street from, like, I think it's the Kimchi building, all the way down to the river. And then as far over as the other side of Memorial Park on Park Ave, and to the businesses off of Fort Street. I think that includes where the Legion is and whatnot. So it's a fairly large area, and that's really, that's obviously why the zone is the commercial business downtown zone. That's the majority of the businesses. And then C5 would be your Old Hope Princeton for the most part. And I don't see any C3s. Do you know where those are?
The C3 is the Save-On
Oh,
site.
okay. There it is. That kind of looks like a 5 on this map too, but I see it's a 3.
So staff sort of made, just to channelize to council those zones, because they all contain retail component, and that's why they were chosen. They're all confined to the Hope proper area. As you move outside of, let's say, the Hope proper, you're looking at the highway commercial zone, the C2 zone, which is more to do with highway-oriented activities, such as gas stations, convenience stores.
C1, that looks like the old Lakeway Market. Is that a commercial? Obviously, it's retail, but is it because it's in a residential area?
C1, yes, it's the former fast track gas station.
Well, that's what you mentioned. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So keep in mind, council can decide if they want to keep it to the Hope proper or expand outwards. The use regulations can dictate that.
So yeah, I'm comfortable with the CBD, C3, and C5, then that gives opportunity for Old Princeton Highway and the downtown core.
Covers it all.
I'm comfortable with that as well.
All right, okay. Do you have some direction there, Mr. Gill? Thank you. What would you like to tackle next?
Let's just go back to the spatial separation now, for the buffer zone. And which activities would council like to see this sort of buffered from? So provincially, regulations, you're not allowed to smoke in public areas, be it playgrounds, rec centers and all that. So are we going to be buffering from those activities exclusively? Or would you like to see, let's say, daycare facilities that are business licensed through the district of Hope as well to be a part of that?
They are not now.
Well, daycares, there's, I think
We have two licensed daycares.
that's correct.
Yeah.
That should be buffered out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That should be added.
Absolutely.
And now how large of a buffer is it? Is it the 100 meters that we're looking at here? Or is it going to be?
Quick question on this. It's been a question that's been asked to me before. With the retail end of things, none of these through the provincial government could have like a lounge per se, like where there's like a smoke lounge or anything like that without them?
At this point in time, no. However,
Could change.
it could change, just like microbreweries.
Yeah, no, they're breweries and then now all of a sudden they're having a lounge setting to them and stuff like that. It's just something that's come up as well, like with the boundaries and stuff like that setting, like most people will just go buy, I don't buy my beer at the beer store, drink it outside the beer store, or go somewhere else with it. Same thing with smoking, I don't think anybody's gonna buy the weed and go smoke it right there too, so, but is there something that we should, just on this, why it came up fresh in my mind, especially daycares, is it something that we should look at down the road or end up putting into it now with, is there something that we have a tool with the bylaw and the things to keep it
I think
strictly retail?
once we establish the route we're going, there's always going to be a license portion of it, like either be established by policy and paying the fee to do the administration of the license work, let's say gather and use. There'll probably be also a license amendment portion, because a lot can change. Let's say now and 5 years from now, within a buffer area, you could probably have more institutional uses or the loss of institutional uses.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you.
So aren't these facilities treated similar to a pharmacy and a liquor store?
Your worship, through you, no, they don't want to be, and it's quite specific, it's for recreational use. They don't want a connotation of pharmacy being sort of applied to this. Then you're sort of stepping into the medical field. They don't want a misinterpretation of that.
Councilor Madden.
So again, looking at the map of basically town proper, P1 and P2 are the two zones that are parks, and P2 covers the hospital and both licensed daycares. So if we have a 100-meter buffer from all P1 and P2 zones, that would then further show a restriction on the map as to where business would be allowable, right?
Yes, and I should let you know, when I say daycare facilities that are licensed through the District of Oakville, home occupations also allow for daycares as well. And so what it would require is staff to review our business licenses to see, let's say during the time of an application, to find out exactly where a location is within a neighborhood.
I'd be okay with that, but I think for the most part, those ones would be farther than 100 meters away from wherever business could be set up, so. I think to simplify it, like I was looking at some of these bylaws in some communities, they're complicated. And I think to keep it as simple as possible is the easiest for staff as far as taking applications and explaining allowable areas and things. So I would say that all P1 and P2 zones should have a 100-meter buffer from them. That should cover it.
Does that mirror tobacco right now as well?
No, I think,
Because you can sell that anywhere.
No,
I don't
as
think
far
there's
as,
any
as
restriction.
far as the use of it.
in tobacco, no, I think Fraser Health has sort of wants municipalities to take on buffer zones from, let's say, tobacco selling areas from,
Similar. But right now, there's nothing in our community.
there's nothing, no.
Do we have some consensus on that as well? On
Yeah.
Anyone?
Yeah, I agree.
And schools are included in B1 or 2?
Yeah,
They are.
Yeah, schools are the key.
yeah, I think that keeps it
B2?
simple.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Anything else on separation there?
Well, I think this is from each other.
The only other buffer would be from, let's say, another cannabis store and what the let's say that establishment from, let's say, someone proposing to be a new one.
Yeah.
If there, some municipalities do that as well, so you're not creating concentration of these shops.
And at the same time, we should have a conversation about limiting the numbers. I would personally like to see that. I don't think we want 6 or 7 open all at the same time and the best man that's left standing. I don't like, anyway. Councilor Medlock.
So I like the idea of, I'm just throwing a number out there because I haven't actually tried to plot it on a map, but the idea of like 300 or 400 meters between each other. And I think that in itself would help reduce the number of available locations. I don't know what the number would be. And I don't like the idea of putting a hard number on maximum number of locations, because I think it's not done with any other business in the community. And I think that that would be something that you let the market determine, you let a business determine that there's room for this in the market. There's that location that I'm left with at the end of it would be satisfactory to them, and let them try it. And if they fail, you know, that's unfortunate they fail, but I don't think that it would be right to cause them not to be able to give it a try because we've set a maximum limit. I think the market should determine that, and I think that's what a lot of the other communities have done. And they found that, you know, they've got 2 or 3 that open, and there's no more interest after that because it's sort of market saturation at that point. So that's why I say like a distance between them of say 400 or maybe even 500 meters. I'm not too sure what it would look like, but that would kind of put one at either end of the community. Maybe one out on the open Princeton, and that would probably limit it. But if it didn't, if there was room for another one and it was successful, I mean, we have 23 hotels in town. You know, the 23rd one thought there was room for another one. They're still here, so I think that's the kind of the way I look at it is they should have that opportunity to open the business and try and make it work. And when you have competition like that, it raises the bar for everybody else, and survival of the fittest perhaps, but hopefully they all survive.
I think you need to look at it from a healthcare perspective as well, not forget that aspect of it.
But that, I don't know that that should be even part of this conversation. This is not a discussion on whether or not it's right or wrong, it's a discussion on the business. I mean, influence on children and things is why I think we limit the P1, P2 type of situation. And that's where the healthcare part of it comes into it. But I don't want to be the person that determines that somebody that can choose or not choose to do something that is going to be illegal. So that's why I don't like that part of the conversation. I just try to keep it as simple as allowing a business to go anywhere in the community that it wants to, with some restrictions on there so that we have some say in it, I suppose. But yeah, I try to stay away from the conversation on the benefits of it or the ill effects of it.
Okay,
Because
point
it's a
taken.
legal business.
Councilor Smith.
Yeah, I agree with Scott on it. We don't get a business license for pizzas and restaurants and stuff like that and say there's only allowed to have so many of this on it too. The other thing that has been brought up by Jazz, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if council this day or the next council sees it and either it's limited or we let it sit wide open, in the end of it, it is council's direction of yes or no. So if the council takes it on right now for the next 3 years, we see, or 2 years, and see it happen the way we set it up now, and it's going well, we don't put a limit on it, and there's room for maybe amending it, maybe we amend certain bylaws at that point in time. That is council's direction, and we say yes or no on that. So I think if every application is coming to council and it's a yes or no from us, why put a number on it? We could make that decision then. If we have three and we've agreed on it then, or council's agreed on it then, and we go, you know what, right now, the town doesn't have an appetite for this right now, I think we're capping it at 3, we'll revisit this in a year. Why put a limit on it if we're the final say on it? So that's my opinion.
Councilor Trump.
That was my only concern actually between what Scott said and what Dusty actually said as well, is my biggest fear is that you said with 30 applicants, which are all, which I'm assuming at least 50% are generally new to this, are trying this out. I just don't want to have the same thing with empty store buildings or with failed businesses, on the worst case scenario, failed business. But my question is, just that what Dusty I think kind of half clarified for me is, when the applicants do come forward, we have the final say whether or not it's a go-ahead or not. Is that on us?
Yes.
So I think, yeah, then if that's the case, and I do agree that we don't set like a distinct number. I think you just leave it up to the 7 of us to decide at that point if it's feasible.
So, 1 second, it's Councilor Smith and then to.
Okay. The big thing is about this, because it's so tightly regulated and everything else, and we want to make sure we're doing it right for our community. And if you take a look, some of them have had policing issues and that, because of that. So we'd rather have quality with the regulations they have in policing, and if we want to see another one come, like say, come back to council and said, you know what, looks like they're doing good, everything's good, we're not having issues with the police. Because all you need to do is somebody doing something a little dark side out of it, off the table, and then, you know, to keep his business running. You know, then we're gonna feel bad about it, because we don't want that situation. But I agree with, like, we should not regulate the numbers and just see what the town does, because maybe down the road they're gonna be more, I don't know. But I wanna make sure the regulating and the policing's, you know, looked after first, so.
Councilor Medlock.
I guess my question is about Councilor Smith's comment about, like, if we do not limit them and there's already 4 or a number, and somebody else applies, do we have the ability to say no if they fit every other part of the allowances? Like if they find a location that's suited, that's within the buffer zones, no variance is required, they get everything in the province, what rationale do we have to say no at that point?
Yeah.
Like I think that would put us in a position where
Legality.
we probably couldn't say no. So we may have that final say, but I think we'd be really hard pressed to tell somebody no.
I think I've added that point in the report,
That does make a
and I've taken it verbatim from the LCRB's website. I can find it here.
Like, I guess my point is you know, I'm more of a let the market decide kind of person. If there's 30 applicants or people inquiries already asking, and we open it up, those that are ready to go will be the first to apply, and they're probably the ones that are, I don't want to necessarily say, but for us to say it, the most professional about it, because they probably got operations elsewhere, or at least they're ready to go with it. And those that are not may not have an opportunity to apply, or we'll find out that it wouldn't work out for them. But I don't know how we can actually limit, if we don't set a certain number, which I know we have the ability to do, I don't know how we could turn somebody down. And I liken it to what Councilor Smith said too about other types of businesses. It's a little odd to me that we have the ability to say no more than this number, and we don't do that with, we hear it all the time. Well, gas stations are a lot less now than they used to be, but hotels and pizza places and coffee shops and consignment stores and those kind of things, we don't. And, you know, some of the businesses may not necessarily be healthy.
They fall within the parameters
I
of
don't
the different
understand
zoning.
where you try that rate in some situations, not in other ways, to grant them to us in certain situations.
It would fall down to, let's see, the motion of council then to put a moratorium on once you've reached a,
Per capita.
Isn't that,
type thing.
isn't there
where you feel that, all right, I think our
effort?
municipality is comfortable, we might be in that critical mass where we're going over and above and beyond. You can put a moratorium on for a certain timeline after the fact.
Patago is still
That's a
there.
good idea. Like,
Yeah,
it's very
I
important.
think the more we have, the more administration costs we would have.
It's not what it used to be from what I remember.
If that were to
Still there.
take place.
Exactly.
So that's why
I
I think
agree.
it's good for us to look at each one case as it comes in and we can say, no, we think we have enough.
Yeah, and if, with the motion of council, at that point in time, staff then can just say, we have a motion here, we're not accepting any more applications at this point in time.
Okay, well, that's a tool.
Well, just a quick, one more quick question on it too, is there, like, is staff gonna prepare the application process, I'm assuming, for this? What if, I'm assuming consensus is we're going forward and doing this. When you get 30 applicants now, like, how much time staff, I know staff's busy on a lot of things, so how much time, so these 10 applicants get in theirs and first, is gonna be the first come, first served basis? Or some people have some of the stuff forward, but staff's working on these files already, these guys came in a day later, well, too bad, so sad. Like, I don't know how much push we're gonna get, if we're gonna get 20, 30 applicants, but is it gonna turn into every council meeting now, we have 5 applications on the table here, like, there's gotta be a limit on that part of it. If we're gonna hit a capita of 5 and try it out with a 1 year, 2 year timeline, and then after that, like you say, no more applications, it's gonna be a tough one. We don't, 30 of them, every council meeting is gonna turn into cannabis talk.
And through your worship, ideally, whoever has the most, we get our regulations in place, whoever is favorable with those regulations that have the less hurdles to go through without
They
variance
get
and permits,
promotion over it.
ideally, they probably might be coming to council first for the gathering of views of the public, without variance permits holding them up.
Certain stipulations, yeah, okay, thanks, Jeff.
Could we possibly just, start with one and go with that, because there's no influx of cash, we're not getting any revenue out of this. And you've seen other towns have got debt from this thing because they weren't prepared. So I think, if we had one and see how it goes, and everything else, and then revisit it at a certain time.
Well, the way I understand this now is that people have to apply to the provincial governments first. And then when it comes to the provincial government refers it to us, they have to have a location. And that location has to be in a certain zone that we dictate, yes, it would be a certain zone. And if the location's okay with no building, then they'd have to have a building permit, and it would be a long, I can't see this happening overnight. Because the application process seems to be quite a,
So typically what we see is a tire kicker.
yeah.
They'll come in and they'll say, hey, do you guys got any regulations for retail cannabis? Right now, we just tell them it's prohibition, and that's it, it ends. If we do say, yes, we do, here's the parameters as to sort of, they may go on the basis of that information, figure out a location, and then send an application subject to the sale of that property and a successful sort of receipt of that license approval.
But then it would come to us saying, yes, that location's okay, it's in C1 or C2, whatever it is, and it's outside the parameters that we're not,
Yep.
are not allowed, then we could say, yes, this one can go ahead. We would approve that, and then see what happens on their part.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not gonna happen overnight. It'll probably take some time in establishing something like that in that scenario where it needs to be built up. They need to go through a, let's say, development permit, or they need to revise their building drawings.
Quick question on this, for business licensing, right now, if I'm renting a building, bringing the business application, does the owner have to have consent that, yes, this business can happen in that building? Okay. Thank you.
On the buffer between them, I'm just looking at the area around Memorial Park there and trying to figure it out. I think that would be roughly a 400-meter buffer from end to end, eh? Like, if it's 100 meters from each property line, the park's probably 200 meters.
Yeah.
So straight across,
Yeah.
you're saying?
So I'm thinking that's a good distance. If you had a business at one end of that and one at the other end of that, that's it's a block and a half, 2 blocks apart. And I think that in itself will limit the maximum number that can be in the CBD zone. And then similar on the Old Princeton Highway, I think there would be, you know, if somebody plunked one there in the middle, that might eliminate every other end of it. But it would be, in my opinion, a first come, first served, whoever had the application together and fit the criteria before we come to council for approval.
Just to clarify, Scott, that was 200 meters?
I'm thinking 400, because
400.
that map shows 100 meters around North Park, that basically takes up a city block, 100
Yeah.
meters. So 400 meters would be about 2 city blocks in total.
So I was thinking along the same lines of 400 meters.
So 400 is an acceptable,
From each location.
Between retail locations.
Yeah. I think that's a great.
Just to make sure I've got it right, so you want 400 meters between retail locations, 100-meter buffer from P1 and P2 zones, and you want to allow it within all commercial zones and CBD zones?
Well, CBD, C3, C5, because those are the retail commercial zones.
And with the 100-meter radius.
And schools, schools,
Or
P1, P2 would cover that. The only other one would be, let's say, those home occupations that have a daycare facility that are licensed through the district of Columbia.
But that would be in residential mostly.
Yeah, there are some scenarios that we could see that happening.
Like the whole Princeton. Where there's.
Or
a
even more
daycare.
hours of the residential there.
And are we comfortable with the application process, first come, first served, the ones that have completed their application, they're in?
So
That's a good way of reading it, yeah.
I think it'll work itself out, so.
The most prepared will get in the passes.
Just think so.
Quick question to Jazz on it. If somebody comes in, once this is set up like this now, do they get I'm coming asking you to wanna do a retail location here. Is there red and green zones, like go, no-go zones that, like, as a map, an applicant can have? Or is that through the application process first, like pay the application fee and do that process first? And then if another one goes up, like say if we have a green zone here, now the applicant's now successful in there, that becomes a red zone now.
Well, in that case, it'd be like a live map. It
Live
would
map,
change.
perfect.
Change
So
everything.
if they have the one-on-one conversation, you can, this is kind of where the last area is that maybe you could do this unless you rezone and go that.
That's right.
Okay.
Each inquiry, we would probably look at it. We can sort of use our mapping system to figure out where that.
I don't think this is gonna be as complicated as I think in the end of it, and I personally think there's gonna be about 3 or 4 good businesses that we're gonna end up in this town, I personally think, doing a good thing, but yeah, I'm just curious about that part of it. Thank you.
You had a
Oh,
thought?
government versus non-government too, that was one of the survey questions. So I don't think we should limit it to just private. I think if a government facility wanted to open and operate, they would be able to do it in their current facility, they'd have to find another building and do it. I don't see any real difference to that over having a private operation.
They tend to be going into the higher volume communities, higher
Yeah.
population.
So chances
I
are,
don't.
but
that's a very-
I don't think we should limit them to
No.
not being allowed, is my point, I suppose.
That may not be an option given the province on that. I don't know.
Yeah.
What would you like to look at now, Mr. Gill? You're on a roll.
We're moving on this. Do we want to go above and beyond what the province is legislating? Let's say for times.
No. They have pretty well everything covered there.
As for like operating hours,
And 9 to 11 hours.
yeah,
Yeah.
either of those are.
And then the LCRB license requirements gathered used for licensing. Now, to give council an idea, it's not really prescriptive. What they look for is a methodology the municipality uses. Be it a mail-out notification, signage at site, and or basically advertisements in the newspaper to say that they're going to be opening up a facility or they've applied for an application for their. That's how us municipalities look at sort of doing gathering and review. I know after this process, once we establish some sort of framework to represent to council, we'll probably have a better idea as to which route we want to go. Either we're amending the procedural bylaw or looking at a policy format that basically there's a fee associated in the fees and schedule bylaw.
We're not there yet.
That'd be determined, you're saying? Yes.
To be determined, we're not there yet. We can treat it similar to a rezoning, and or let's say a development variance permit within the buffer area may be triggering the same process again. Because you're gathering the views of the public for a specific application, and why not to have it this much away from the Memorial Park? Yeah.
So you're saying the same thing would be applied?
There's an overlap there, and technically, we wouldn't want to go through the process twice. It'd just be time consuming. We probably just want to maintain it as a part of that. Let's say your variance permit doesn't go through, your license is pretty much not going to go through either.
What's the next steps?
So once council's resolved that this is the methodology that we're going to be using, we're going to draft up a use regulations, perhaps text amendments for those zones that have been considered for this,
Okay.
and then present it to council.
When do you see that happening? Not to nail you down.
We understand that right now, the edibles market isn't really happening, illicitly it is, but there's an expected timeline in December for them to sort of make it onto the shelves. We'll probably won't see a complete bylaw or the bylaw process completed until the new year. That's what I feel, conservatively speaking.
Has there been a lot of changes to the regulation to deal with edibles?
No, they were considered edibles as a part of this process. And the edibles item was passed in October there, on the 17th.
Yeah.
So it's expected to be a part of the cannabis retail trade.
Okay.
As of October 17th? Yes.
So on the edibles, the health department would be involved in that too, right?
So edibles fall under the Health Canada jurisdiction. So the federal government licenses those producers that are allowed. We could see changes in the zoning bylaw as well, because we may be removing cannabis produced or medical marijuana production facility and just calling it a cannabis production facility, because those producers both are part of the pharmaceutical side and also the retail side of things. So those are the other items that we're looking at as well. And there could be other sort of amendments to our existing bylaws that these changes may impact.
Any other questions for Mr. Gill? Justin?
One comment, I guess, just looking at some of the other processes, I think trying to form a bylaw or text amendments, I think just the idea of keeping it simple is sort of a great idea. Like there's, was this trail here, they've got different fees based on square footage of the facility and things like that. I thought, why burden yourselves with that kind of work? So I think when trying to come up with the fee, the business license fee was shown was supposed to encompass the costs of the process and all of that. Try and keep it as simple as possible. I think we'll be okay.
So as far as the building facility, when does the building bylaw, the provincial government put in regulations on how the building would be secured and the state, and do we have a building regulation for that in place now?
We wouldn't have that, that's the provincial regulations would require that. So anytime they apply for a license, they're gonna look at the floor plans, and they'll make a determination as to if it's
Who's
compliant.
the
The provincial government, not the municipality, we would not take ownership of that, we're not the issuer of the license, we're just a
yeah, but we're the
component.
one that is enforcing the building bylaws regarding that, then, right?
No, it's not under our administration when it comes down to sort of them required to meet the provincial, it's not our jurisdiction, it'd be a misrepresentation, it's ultra vires if we did something like that, legally speaking.
So the province should enforce their requirements for the licensing. It's similar to,
So does the province come here and check to make sure the regulations, the building requirement, like the safety and the locks and the air conditioning and the air exchange?
They will, because if it's a new building and you're anticipating a license, they would want to take a look at it.
That's the province, not us.
Not us.
similar to production, it's a federal jurisdiction. So the feds were deeply involved in the design, the inspection, and the confirmation of the building envelope. And they maintain that regulatory work.
Councillor Smith, did you have a?
Yeah, just a quick question, when we're doing this process, is there gonna be, when the text amendments happen, like, 'cause there's so many different bylaws that are, this is gonna affect in zonings, is it gonna be blanketed, will it be blanketed into one meeting for all the different changes that'll be into that, or is it gonna be a separate one for?
I guess you can cover it all off under one report, but talking about the different sections.
Different
that-
sections
where
it gets
And
off.
it's no different than what we've done with the housekeeping bylaw.
Yeah, okay.
It would be through a committee of the whole, it'd be a dialogue,
Yeah.
conversation. So at that time, hopefully you'll be able to look at the notification, policy, bylaw, whatever it's gonna be, business license fees and all of that. And ideally trying to time it so it all rolls out
That's it.
together, because your fees and charges bylaw is only 2 meetings, whereas your zoning amendments will take highways approvals, public consultation, a little bit longer, so we'll try and roll them out consecutively.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we do have a resolution to consider here, that mayor and council receive the retail sale cannabis report for information. So I need a move. Second, all those in favor, opposed, carried. At this time, we will take questions from the public for items relevant to the agenda. Anyone would like to ask a question of council at this time?
Sure, all eyes are on me anyway. Hi guys, Avery Coates, how you all doing? One of the questions that I have mainly is, you guys said first come, first serve. Now, on my understanding from different individuals across different provinces, the federal government, provincial governments have not hired anybody else to be doing any of these processing. So, looking at it from a realistic point of view, when you say first come, first serve, it's kind of like somebody making a compensation paperwork or an EI paperwork or something like that. If it's got to travel down the hallway to get to the next individual for processing, it's immediately put on the bottom of a stack or an incoming file. Therefore, even though somebody is weeks ahead or even months ahead, they could actually be several weeks or months behind somebody else that could all of a sudden just take that piece of paper down that hallway, as opposed to sending it appropriately. That first come, first serve really doesn't justify, I guess not justify, it's not really fair to every individual that wants to have the chance to be able to sell retail. That's the first statement that I'd like to make, more than a question, something for you guys to ponder in that aspect of what you've already discussed. The next one, the schools and everything like that, absolutely, by all means, I think you guys are doing a great job in setting that down. Like the idea of not having a max number of businesses, it gives a lot of people opportunities to be able to find a way in. There was another comment though in regards to the old Hope Princeton Highway, if somebody was to set up smack dab in the middle. I mean, there is no properties right now that is available to that. But looking ahead, as you guys will have the last say on all of this, I think if you guys looked at it with the idea that instead of giving first come, first serve, you allow it to be a quarterly decision, it would give room for other paperwork to be processed. That would give people room to be able to look at other locations to be able to fit something in those parameters, as opposed to all of a sudden somebody else's process. Now my whole application is gone and tossed because the location that I'm looking at or was depending upon or was hoping for is now null and void because somebody else has been approved. There are little legalities like that that I think will really hurt those that would be interested in doing it. I mean, big business is big business. Other people that have these entities in place already, it's a flip of a coin whether they did it legitimately to begin with and if they've been grandfathered in. Because there has been that situation all over the provinces, all over Canada already. So just maybe a little bit of talk amongst yourselves, due diligence. I do have a full list of other things at this time, but I'm gonna hold off on some of it until this progresses further. I know that you guys are working on it. Great on you. I know it's not gonna happen quickly. We know that our community wants it, and we know that there's a lot of health benefits for people. So if this happens, it's a great thing. Just, those are more comments, I guess, than questions. And I apologize for that, but maybe it's just a fresh, different set of eyes for somebody that gets these questions several dozen times a day, weekly, you know, so all the best to you. I hope you guys do it right. Cheers.
Thanks for your comments. Anyone else over there like to take a run at it?
Can I ask a question based on the comment?
Sure, go ahead.
So I have a question then for staff based on Avery's comments there, so. Like the idea of first come, first served. If they're applying to the provincial government first, and then we get notification whenever that happens, like we have no control over as to which is, if application number 3 to the province comes to us as application number 1, we have no control over that part of it. So I think when I say first come, first served, it's as far as the applications that come before us. And I don't feel like it's fair to hold up any of those applications just to wait to see what else comes down the line, because then you're favoring a potential business to one that's right in front of you. So I think you have to kind of deal with them as they come in. But I just want to make sure that is the right process. So they do apply to the province first, and then those applications are forwarded to us in no certain order that we have any information about, right? It's just whatever happens to be the one that they put before us, right?
Yeah, and then the clock starts for us to respond.
Right. And then I can see your point about perhaps somebody's application might be in the works and gets squished based on the location being taken, or that changing a radius because of their location selection, but I hate to be cruel about it, but I think that's just sort of an unfortunate way that things may potentially happen. Again, you can't hold off and say, well, you can't use that location because that's going to limit the number of facilities in town. It's just the way it is, you know, and I use the example of somebody putting one smack dab in the middle of Open Princeton Highway may eliminate, I don't know if it would or not, but everybody still has an application for, an opportunity to apply for a variance, and I think I like that part of it, and that regardless of the limitations that we may put into these zoning bylaws, everybody has an opportunity to apply for a variance with a specific case and state that why they think this is something that they can make work given the limitations that we've given. So I think that is a fair process, and that's just my comment on your question, I guess.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks.
Any other comments? Thank you. Motion to close. Move second, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you. Council needs to stick around for a few more minutes here.